Welcome back to The Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise, give you the real insights behind the headlines. And today, we're diving into someone who's really at a fascinating and often pretty controversial spot in the hip-hop world, Adam Grandmaison. You probably know him better as Adam22, the guy behind the huge No Jumper platform. So what we want to do today is unpack the different sides of this, look at the claims, the defenses, explore this whole journey of someone seen as an outsider who ended up having this massive influence and, let's be real, making a lot of money from a culture. We've looked at reports covering, his background, that big career shift he made, and all the arguments around this label he gets tagged with, Culture Vulture.
Yeah, and what's really compelling here, I think, is how this whole situation makes you grapple with some really big questions. Questions that go way beyond just Adam22, right? We're talking about authenticity, who owns a culture, how culture even changes in this digital age. Is his story about exploitation? Or is it actually about giving a platform to new, important voices? That's kind of the core tension we're digging into for you.
Okay, so to really get this, we need to rewind. Go back to Adam Grandmaison's beginnings, because it's pretty far removed from the hip-hop scene he'd eventually dominate. He was born November 24, 1983, Nashua, New Hampshire, early life, Nashua High School South, a bit of college, then a move to New York. Not exactly steeped in rap from day one. There's also this interesting detail about his youth. His dad had some legal trouble. Arrested for a white-collar crime when Adam was, in 6th grade. Got out around when Adam turned 16. I might not directly connect, but it adds a layer, Suggests maybe things weren't always simple growing up.
Right, and what the sources really point to as being fundamental for Adam22 back then, the thing that really shaped him early on wasn't music. It was BMX biking, like a deep, almost obsessive passion from when he was pretty young.
Definitely not just a hobby.
No, it was his world.
And you can really feel that when you hear him talk about it from back then. He shared these really vivid memories, like seeing Edwin De La Rosa's street riding and just being blown away. He talks about the thrill of being part of that whole scene. It was clearly a huge part of his identity.
And it wasn't just passion, it became his business focus too.
Totally. In 2006, he starts The Come Up, that BMX website. It basically became the online spot for that community. Then he launched On Some Shit, OSS, right? Which was more than just a brand.
Exactly. It was like a whole package deal. A BMX team, the clothing line.
Yeah, and even a physical store out on Melrose in LA.
So the key thing here, I think, for our deep dive is that his first big success wasn't some fluke. He clearly knew how to build a community, build a business around something he was genuinely deep into. He understood online platforms, how to make a hub. That skill becomes really important later.
Right. And here's where the path takes that really sharp turn. Moving from the world he built, BMX, into hip-hop. Something you could argue he sort of shifted into strategically. Okay, he did have some connection early on. The name No Jumper itself, that's from a Gucci Mane lyric, right? I'm balling like an athlete, but got no jumper.
Yeah, it shows awareness.
But maybe not that deep, lifelong passion we saw with BMX.
That's exactly what the sources dig into, and it raises that key question.
Yeah.
How authentic was that early interest in rap? The reports are pretty blunt, saying Adam22 did not grow up as a rap enthusiast. There's even this quote from a former associate, Lush.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
Who said Adam basically made it clear he's not interested in hip-hop. He listens to podcasts more than he does rap music, which, suggests his focus was elsewhere then.
And Lush also said No Jumper actually started out as him doing BMX shit.
Right.
So the pivot, according to Lush anyway, wasn't about falling in love with rap suddenly. It was because the rap content just started getting more clicks online.
Mm-hmm.
So around 2015, Adam shifts No Jumper's focus, moves away from the underground stuff, BMX, alternative culture, and dives headfirst into SoundCloud rap, that raw DIY sound that was blowing up and doing more traditional hip-hop interviews.
And looking back, that pivot was incredibly smart. Maybe opportunistic, some would say, but definitely strategic. He saw something happening, this wave of SoundCloud artists, before a lot of the mainstream media really caught on.
Absolutely. His platform just exploded. He got some of the very first interviews with artists who became huge names. XXXTentacion, Lil Pump, Juice WRLD.
Yeah. Crucial early exposure for them.
So this move wasn't just a small change. It put him right at the center of rap media, turned No Jumper into this massive multi-million-dollar thing, and made Adam22 himself a major player.
Undeniably.
Okay, so let's get into that term, culture vulture. What does it actually mean when people, especially in the hip-hop community, use it against him? It's not just name-calling, right? It's a pretty specific critique.
Exactly. It generally describes someone, often not from the Black community where hip-hop originated, who comes into that cultural space and essentially profits from it, maybe exploits it, without having those deep, authentic roots or showing real respect for its traditions and the community itself. It implies taking more than you give or taking in the wrong way.
Like an extractive relationship.
Precisely.
Hmm.
And that definition is key to understanding the criticism against Adam 22. The sources we looked at lay out a few core arguments from his critics. First, his origins. Coming into hip-hop without that background, with BMX being his real passion, critics ask, can you really be a tastemaker without that lived cultural connection?
Makes sense. What else?
Second, the timing. The claim is he basically rebranded when he saw the money shifting towards rap, suggests opportunism over genuine passion. Third, his interview style gets brought up a lot. Critics say he often focused on sensational stuff, crime, gangs, personal drama. And some feel that echoes this older pattern of outsiders profiting from Black culture by highlighting the most controversial parts, not necessarily the art or the message.
Right. Focusing on the clicks over maybe the substance or the impact.
Yeah, which leads to the fourth point.
Yeah.
Some artists and commentators have straight up accused him of taking advantage of young, vulnerable rappers. These artists are maybe desperate for exposure early on, and the accusation is No Jumper used their stories for views without really caring about the consequences for their careers or lives.
Wow. So, yeah, it's a heavy accusation. It's rooted in this feeling that he gained massively from a culture he wasn't born into, maybe without fully getting or respecting its nuances. For some people, it's about the soul of hip-hop.
It taps into much bigger historical issues of cultural appropriation and exploitation.
But, like we said, there are two sides. There are definitely people who defend Adam 22. They argue, okay, maybe his origins aren't in hip-hop, but you can't just dismiss his dedication and what he's actually done in the scene over the past, decade plus?
Right. And the main counterargument is pretty compelling. He gave crucial early exposure to tons of underground artists who were struggling to get noticed by traditional gatekeepers. He basically provided a launch pad. Think about how many careers arguably got a major boost or even started because of a No Jumper interview.
That's undeniable. He bypassed the old systems for a lot of artists.
He really did. And supporters also bring up that hip-hop itself has never stayed static. It's always evolved, gone global, absorbed new influences.
Yeah, it's not confined to one place or one group anymore.
Exactly. So they see Adam's role less as an intruder and more as just reflecting that evolution. He's a media figure bringing new sounds to a wider, more diverse audience.
A conduit, like you said earlier, not necessarily a gatekeeper trying to keep people out.
Which brings us back to that core question about authenticity, doesn't it? Does putting in the work, consistently providing that platform for years, does that earn you a place? Can that outweigh not having those original ties? Can you sort of earn authenticity through action and impact, even if you didn't start there? It really makes you think about what belonging means in culture today.
It definitely does.
Yeah.
Okay, let's touch on one last piece here. It's kind of a side note, but it adds another interesting layer to how people perceive Adam 22, especially around ideas of privilege or connections. It involves his father, Philip J. Grandmaison. There's some high-profile political stuff there.
What's the story?
Well, back in 1996, his dad was convicted for voter mail fraud.
Okay.
But then, in a pretty unusual move, President Bill Clinton pardoned him in December 2000.
Wow, a presidential pardon for that.
Yeah. It's not something you see every day for that kind of conviction.
Definitely not. And that connection, plus the surname itself, Grandmaison, well, you can imagine how that played online. It fueled a lot of speculation, conspiracy theories even. On places like Reddit, people were talking about possible Freemason connections, claiming his dad was a Freemason, or even tied to Skull and Bones.
Right. Now, we absolutely have to stress those Freemason or Skull and Bones claims, totally unverified. Pure online rumor territory.
Very important distinction.
But still, you put together a presidential pardon for a fraud conviction and a name that sounds like Grandmaison. It definitely fed into speculation about his family background. For some, it painted this picture of, potential privilege or hidden connections.
And connecting that back to the main debate, you can see how that narrative, even if based on rumors, could subtly influence things. It can feed into the culture vulture argument if people perceive him as coming from a background with inherent advantages, using that leverage perhaps unfairly in a different cultural space. It adds this extra layer of scrutiny.
Yeah, it definitely complicates the picture. So, okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. Adam Grandmason's journey from BMX kid in New Hampshire building his own thing to becoming this really powerful and polarizing force in hip-hop media. We've looked at that culture vulture debate, the arguments about opportunism versus platforming new talent, and how hip-hop itself is always changing.
And ultimately, this whole conversation about Adam 22, it really boils down to how you personally define things like authenticity, cultural ownership, and what genuine commitment looks like in art. There's no denying he's profited hugely from a culture he didn't originate in, so his legacy is kind of caught, isn't it, between those accusations of exploitation and the real recognition he gets for helping launch artists.
Which leaves us, and leaves you listening, with a really interesting question to chew on, I think.
Hmm.
In this world where everything's global, everything's online, where do we draw those lines? When does appreciating a culture become contributing to it? And when does contributing maybe tip over into exploiting it?
Does the intention behind someone's actions matter more, or is it all about the impact?
Exactly. What does authenticity even mean to you when cultures are constantly mixing and changing like they are now? It's a conversation that's definitely not going away.